Okay, everyone, welcome again to We Are Pilgrims on This Earth, Egypt, Part 2. Last time, we got through halfway through our recent Real Break trip, pilgrimage to Egypt. Merlindy, I'm going to ask you to mute, if you could, or I'll mute you. Okay.
Brother Theodore, can you mute me too? Because I just can't.
Okay.
I can't find my little buttons at 2 a.m.
All right, wave at me. So it's 2 a.m. where Maria is, but wave at me if you would like to say something, Maria, or anybody else who's muted. But once we have the slideshow up, it will be a little harder. So you might have to figure out how to unmute yourself. So as I said, we got halfway through the slideshow last time, and as I mentioned last time, every day of the pilgrimage was so much more than we could have hoped for and we anticipated. We had an itinerary, and then God had his own itinerary for us. And so many amazing things happened every day, but it also seemed cumulative and very progressive, so that each day when we thought it just can't get better than this has to be, you know, the highlight of the entire trip, then the next day we'd have some other experience that would even surpass that. And you know, if we did a kind of recap every day with each other, we only did it 3 or 4 times in the whole trip, but if we did a recap every day, we would have gotten no sleep, you know, because there was just so much that each person was experiencing. So what we're doing tonight is just giving you a little inkling of our experiences. But I'm so glad that we have several of the people that were on our pilgrimage with us, several of the students, the OCF students tonight, and so they're going to help Presutet and I as we continue the story. So at this point, I'm going to open up. Unless anyone has any questions, I'm going to open up. Let's see. Share sound, because we might have some sound. And see where exactly we are on here. Well, okay. I need to move this to so I can open up the presentation. All right. So can everybody see our the slideshow?
Yep.
Okay, thank you, somebody, for answering. More people are still joining in. That's great. So for those of you who weren't on last time, this is where we started. And as I said, I'm just going to quickly go through these slides until we get halfway through, and then we'll start an explanation a little bit more. So almost every monastery we went to looked a little bit like this. We weren't even positive which monastery this was at, but who remembers? Say that again. Somebody just stated a name of one of the monasteries, I think. Maybe not. All right. Okay. This was the Minneapolis, Minnesotan group in their airport on their way. There were how many of you all together? Was it 11 that came?
11 of us.
11.
Yeah.
So 11 of the 26 students were from the OCF group up there, and they were really very much a kind of a foundation for all that we did. Here we are, I believe, in the Cairo airport, just waiting for our luggage and picking up our luggage and to be brought for a 3-hour drive to Alexandria on the Mediterranean Sea, where we first, once we arrived in Alexandria, we went to the ancient and famous, the location of the ancient and famous library in Alexandria. It was one of the seven ancient wonders of the world. Unfortunately, it was destroyed and all the volumes were destroyed. But what we saw was the more recently rebuilt amazing library. And we went into detail last time about what, so many special features about this library, that it wasn't, even though it was 14 floors, there was 14 kind of plateaus, one connected to the other on a horizontal kind of vertical rise. There's never any direct lighting coming in to protect the volumes, and so many other things about that library that were fascinating. So you see, just get a little glimpse of what it was like in this slide. Here's a picture of the group in front of the bust of Alexander the Great. If we look a little tired, it's because we had traveled through the night. So most of us had, even if we slept a little bit on the plane, we're definitely sleep deprived. Another of the fascinating features were there were the outside of this library was built with stones with letters of various alphabets from all over the world. And so this is just a picture that shows a little bit of that. We did also stop at a beautiful restaurant that overlooked the Red Sea, a port in the Red Sea. This area right here was where the ancient lighthouse in Alexandria was located. And the museum, I guess, was somewhere over here. But
not the Red Sea.
The library.
The Mediterranean.
The Mediterranean Sea, which that lighthouse is no longer there. Here's a view of what we ate that day. It really was quite scrumptious, and people were very happy. We got to our hotel, and the next morning, we went right away to have liturgy for the Feast of the Ascension at the Church of St. Sava the Sanctified. And lo and behold, we ran into the patriarch. You can see him up here, the Eastern Orthodox patriarch of Alexandria, of the ancient see of Alexandria. He has very few Greek-speaking people left with him in Alexandria at the time. 70 years ago, there was over 500,000 Greek-speaking people, I believe, just in Alexandria, but he said there's only 82 left, or at least 82 there in the kind of compound where we were. But he was overjoyed that we joined them. We got to venerate, let's see, where was it? Right here, the column where St. Catherine was martyred, St. Catherine being the patron saint of the OCF, which was a thrill. We got to venerate the relics of contemporary saints like St. Nectarios, St. Nicephorus the leper, who started in Alexandria before going on to Chios, and many other things. Had a wonderful audience with the patriarch, and he not only fed us in a kandariki, a beautiful room, but then he took us all to the place where he knew would be the best place for a picture, and took a picture with us and turned around and bid farewell until Sunday, and we got to be with him again for Sunday liturgy in Cairo. And then we got a tour of the Church of the Evangelismoch, which is kind of the center of the Patriarchate of Alexandria, the Eastern Orthodox Patriarchate of Alexandria. In Alexandria, we got to meet Metropolitan Panteleimon, who is Panteleimon, right? I think that I'm certain that. And just a fascinating story of his own life. He shared with us, you can see he's holding a little kitten at that time that he had adopted. And he was a favorite of everyone. We also got to go into the chapel where St. Nectarius would hear confessions and read and hear about the whole apology that the Patriarchate of Alexandria has given in more recent times to St. Nectarius for what happened to him while he was there. Then we went on to the Coptic Church of St. Mark's. And last time, Peter Mansour explained to us about these martyrs, these modern-day martyrs. And this is a plaque about their martyrdom. We also, or the next morning when we got up, we and this slide I didn't show last time, but the next morning we got to go to a site of catacombs and we learned a great deal about how ancient Egyptians and even something about how the Christians buried and it's just fascinating to see all of that and to see how much of these ancient Egyptian practices were baptized and kind of found their way into the Coptic Orthodox and the Egyptian Orthodox Christian expression. And then we made our way the next day to the desert Wadi al-Natran, and there were 4 monasteries that we saw in one day. I'm not going to go into detail about each one of them, but the first one was Saint Macarius the Great. We had one of the monks in each one of these monasteries take us around, a fascinating tour, venerating the relics of so many saints of ancient times and holy people, like this grave right here of Saint Matthew the Poor, where we went out into the desert. And each of us had some time alone with God in the desert, sanctified by thousands and thousands and thousands of monks that have gone on before and prayed on the very same spot and location that we did. We got to see what the humble cell of a monk. We got to do so much in each one of these monasteries. We went on to Al Baramos, which means from the Romans, the monastery of the Romans, and got to venerate the remains of the saints there. I think one of these is was it Saint Macarius, and the other one was Saint Moses the Black. Macarius the Great and Moses the Black. I think that's correct.
It's Saint Isidore and Saint Moses the Black.
Isidore, thank you very much, Braden. Glad you're back on this week. Isidore and Moses the Black. We got to then go to the monastery of Saint Paisios the Great, as we call him. The Egyptians call him Saint Bashoy. On our calendar, 2 days ago, June 19th, was his feast day, which was really nice to have that occurrence happen so soon after we had a chance to venerate his relics, as you can see on the picture here. Hear more about that amazing monastery. And all of these monasteries, there are over 100 monks, and some of them were over 200 monks. This monastery, there are 2 monasteries that are just, there used to be hundreds of monasteries in this general area. Now there's these 4 major monasteries left, but 2 of them are literally they're neighbors, they're right next to each other. And this church shows just the degree of the size of it. If we were to zoom in on it, just see how many people come and worship with the monastics and how many people they minister to kind of on a regular basis. This church easily could fit a couple thousand people in it. We got to go into that church as well to see the remains of I think Saint Macarius that were in there. That and then our last monastery that we stayed at, we visited at, was a monastery of El Syrian, and that was the monastery of the 2 Syrian brothers, the saints that were brothers, and that had come there and helped found that monastery. Braden, do you remember anything more about this really quickly that you could add, or anybody else?
So if I remember correctly, this last monastery, it had iconography that came from the Syrians.
Right. Yeah.
So you can see, like, in this area, like it's Egypt. It wasn't just with the Copts. The other jurisdictions of the Oriental Orthodox had come to Egypt to do their monastic practices as well. And I also remember something about maybe Armenians and some others.
Yes. Their Coptic Orthodoxy still has a real insular feel to it. They're almost everyone who is Christian is Coptic. In maybe there is 100 or more thousand the Christians who were throughout Egypt, who may be still connected with the patriarch, the Eastern Orthodox Patriarch of Alexandria, but the ministry that our patriarch said there is his ministry is to the rest of Africa. So there are 17 million Coptic Orthodox, and yet you can see historically what a place where so many people passed through, and it had such a profound effect on the life of the church. At the final monastery, we got to meet this monk who was just a joy, Father Hilarion. He had a great sense of humor. He told us many stories. We stayed there an extra almost 2 hours. If I go back to the previous slide, you'll see this picture here up above. You can't see it in this picture because it's cropped, but I'm going to try to go close enough that you can get a sense that we're being lit by the light that is above the artificial lighting in the courtyard of the monastery. This is the bookstore over on this side, but we had kept him probably, an hour or two past his bedtime up with us. But he was just so happy to have us there with them. And you can see we got to go shopping in their bookstore and icon store there. So it just such an amazing day to go from one monastery to another, and each one just seemed more alive and
I'd say it was a little more that he didn't let us go. He really, really enjoyed having us, and even called us on the phone the next day. He called our tour guide to see how the students were, and how much he enjoyed being with everybody.
One of our students left their phone where we were taking the picture, or she didn't know exactly where, maybe it was somewhere in the bookstore. And we were leaving, and there was just no chance that we were going to get it again. So the bus stopped. Our tour guide made a call, and lo and behold, Father Hilarion went and found the phone and had it brought to us. So yeah, he was showed such hospitality.
And this monastery is associated with Saint Paisios the Great, and I believe Saint Ephraim. Like in the previous slide, there's like this like the cave looking area. I think that was associated with Saint Paisios the Great, where he prayed.
Yeah.
This one, yeah.
I think that was the cave where he was washing the man's feet, and Jesus appeared to him, I think.
Right, he was just washing someone's feet who had come to the monastery, and it turned out it was Christ who had come. Then he had that vision. Thank you.
And then also there was a tree there that was associated with, I believe, Saint Ephraim, and he had a wooden stick that through a miracle of God became a big tree.
I think that may be this picture right here.
Yeah, I'm sure
there's a whole building around it that's kind of cropped out of the picture, but yeah. So fascinating.
Forgive me that I don't remember, but because we see this icon of the Panagia nursing, is that perhaps a place that the Holy Family had stayed?
Yes, thank you, President. And this was one of the first places that, it wasn't the first, but it was one of the first places that we saw that we where it's according to their tradition, which goes back to the earliest of the presence, the Christian presence in Egypt, that the Virgin Mary passed through when the Holy Family came into Egypt. Most of us, when we heard about that story, we think to ourselves, all right, so they found somewhere to stay. It was a foreign country. It probably wasn't so easy for them, but we were blown away to learn so much. And that's why I attached to the invitation for tonight's talk, a description of the Holy Family's journeys in Egypt. And it talks about 21 different locations. In different accounts, I've heard of 15 up to 25 places where the Holy Family stopped. And they know even how long they stopped. There are miracles in many of these places that are happening even to today, which kind of confirm the authenticity of these locations. The Coptic people hold very dear this tradition, And for me, that was one of the recurring themes through the whole thing, about understanding more fully how Egypt really is a part of the Holy Land. And our Lord really did bless it, and the Virgin Mary's presence there is just profound to this day. I just don't want to take too much time talking about all of that. Maybe we'll have some time in the end. So this is where we left off last time, and now we'll move on. So this was our final day in Alexandria, and when we got up the next morning, we made our way to Cairo, and we would see pyramids as we would pass by. So I think that's why Christina included that in the picture of Cairo. On our way there, we stopped at a monastery called Saint Damiana's monastery, or convent. In the monasteries where we had visited the day before, we heard of 100 to 200 some monks. In this monastery, which is like its own little section of the entire city, there were over 300 nuns that were there. We had an amazing stay there. We got to meet, as you can see down here, a nun who, because she was from Australia, could speak to all of us in English, gave us some of the fascinating history of the monastery. I was trying to download a clip of her speaking to all of us. And she told us her own story of how it is that she came to embrace Coptic Orthodoxy. She has some relatives that are in the Greek Orthodox Church down in Australia. And we met another nun who is not pictured. I couldn't find a picture of her when I was preparing this, Sister or Mother Agapia. And she just showed us the great wisdom that the monastics acquire, and has been studying scripture her whole life, and did an amazing Bible study, you might say, with us on some of the chapters of St. John, where they come from the Last Supper, when Christ is teaching his disciples for a final time, preparing them for his crucifixion, resurrection, his leaving them in the way that he had been with them up until that time, in anticipation of the ascension. And she did it because we had just celebrated the ascension. Whether she knew it or not, the passages that she was doing a Bible study for us, a profound kind of study for us, were the very same passages that if we were keeping the daily reading in the lectionary, in our own lectionary between Ascension and Pentecost, this is what we were reading every day. So it was just another one of those providential little moments. This right here was the location of the grave of Saint Damiana, right? And there was an altar on one side. They allowed the men of the group to go into the altar and venerate a little bit more closely from the front side. And that was something that we just noticed was a little bit difficult. I think this was an ancient altar from before, and I'm forgetting a little bit more of the history, but more recently, Saint Damiana's monastery also is listed as one of the places that the Virgin Mary passed through, and this was I think a part of ruins that were discovered when they were doing more excavation. Does anybody remember that story a little bit better? They shared with us so much. Got a couple of things in the chat.
Father, I believe there were 3 churches, and they had discovered 2 of them. I believe the ones on the 2 outer ones, and then somehow through the grace of God, they've discovered the 3rd that was right next to the original 2. But I could be remembering that wrong.
Thank you. That was Alexandra?
Yeah, sorry. I'm commuting from work, so I can't have my camera on.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Alexandra. Anybody have anything else that they want to share about their time when we stayed at Saint Damiana's monastery? I don't think it's on here, and I debated whether I'd add a slide about the amazing, amazing meal that they had prepared for us when we arrived at the monastery. I don't think any of us were prepared. It was one of those. The table was so richly laden with so much food, and it was a day that we were able to eat meat, and they had meat for us, and as pilgrims. So there's so much more that I could share.
Yeah, I think we were all so overwhelmed by the magnitude of the place and how the history of it and how much was there. And, you know, when you travel with a group, everyone takes something different because we all have our own life experience and our own kind of perspectives and takes on everything. You know, so there's the rich, you know, history of the faith and the monastic tradition and the changes and the building and the discoveries and the, you know, all of that. But also another thing I was so impressed by is that it felt like a little, almost like its own little village. You know, people were just there. I don't want to say hanging out, but it, you know, people went there to just spend the day, and you know, children were running around. You know, it was a little bit, you know, it was just very organic and very real, and I was just very impressed by that as well. It was a very familiar place for the people that obviously just go and spend time there when they have a day off of work or, you know, whatever it is.
It was such a symbiotic relationship, right?
Yeah.
That seemed between the faithful who lived in the world, you know, in cities and so forth, and the monastics. This monastery being right there in the city, it was so, you know, so much more accessible. But it just seems so beautiful. Peter had shared with us that is one of the reasons why you see their piety, the piety of the church in the world, still maintains such a monastic element to it and flair to it. One of the things that we did in every place that we went in to worship or relics that we would venerate is we take our shoes off on the outside in order to stand on holy ground, which was a wonderful thing.
I love that. One other thing I wanted to say about this monastery was they had a tremendous social outreach program in place. They had a home there for women and children. They had a huge group of I think they called them deaconesses, but I think that was just the use of that word of people who have the diaconia job that they do that's kind of within and under the auspices of the church, you know, that kind of went out into the world and helped socially, you know. So I that was another really beautiful thing to see. It was a vast complex of buildings and each with a different purpose. So that was really quite an experience. Yeah.
You would be at one part of the monastery and you'd like look out on a balcony or something, and you'd see like 2 city blocks away another part of the monastery, and you were just kind of overwhelmed by the size of it, the scope of it. I wanted to share with you just briefly the life of Saint Damiana by reading the Coptic prayer, which they call the Coptic doxology, the glorification prayer of Saint Damiana, which kind of tells her story. It's a story very similar to Saint Catherine, and these 40 martyrs that always appear in the icon with her, who because of her example also gave that witness to their love for Christ, even at in the face of martyrdom. I don't recall, I believe we chanted this when we were standing before her grave. Not us, but Peter and his sister Ida chanted beautifully. The wise celibate maiden, the chosen and true lady, the bride of Christ, Saint Damiana. She was filled with wisdom from her childhood. She hated the earthly and she loved virginity. She became the head in a harbor of salvation, the mother of 40 virgins in the tower which her father built. When he denied Christ, his loving daughter Damiana restored his faith, and he received martyrdom. Because of this, the king had sent for her and ordered her to be tortured. She endured repeated sufferings and received martyrdom. The 40 holy virgins who were with her in the tower received martyrdom all in one day with her. Blessed are you, O Damiana, the bride of the bridegroom, the virgin nun, the chosen and true martyr. Pray to the Lord on our behalf, O bride of Christ, Saint Damiana, that he may forgive us our sins.
Amen.
One of the beautiful things about their hymns, when there were these repeat verses, one right after another, that were written in meter, is they would sing the same melody. And when they would sing these particular hymns, they use cymbals that basically just is like percussion. It keeps the beat. And it really is very beautiful. And I've kind of missed that since we heard that so often while we were there. And I think I need to find some good soundtracks with this for us to listen to in our home. But
something to add
please,
really quickly, is at this monastery and many others in places throughout Egypt, is we met so many people who are filled with grace. And for me, I definitely certainly did not expect that. I think for me that you read about these types of people filled with grace, you read about the saints, you read about the lives of these very holy people, but to meet them is something completely different, and to acknowledge that our faith is still very, very much alive was just something that really struck deep within me.
Yeah. We spoke a little bit about that last time, Alexander, but thank you for sharing that. Yeah, we really felt like we met some holy nuns there, and it was wonderful to see the people. I met a priest when we first went in there, and I didn't have very much time with him, but he kind of pulled me by my hand while the rest of the group was waiting outside, brought me into his office, sat me down, and he said to me, "You're not going to like my name. My name is Father Dioscoros." And we then, for those of you who don't know, Dioscoros was patriarch in Alexandria who didn't accept the Fourth Ecumenical Council, and so his writings have been anathematized by our church, but they consider him a saint of the church. And a lot of the ongoing dialogue between the Oriental Orthodox, which the Coptic Church is a part of, and the Eastern Orthodox, there's a great deal of agreement that what happened at the Fourth Council was more misunderstanding of terminology as opposed to a real difference in theology. You can certainly see that in the holiness that we encountered while we were there. They do different liturgies than we do, although they do have St. Basil's liturgy. They also have a liturgy of St. Gregory the theologian. And I think a liturgy attributed to St. Mark the Apostle, who founded Christianity there. But the genuineness in the embrace that he gave me, I can really say at that moment there was just something changed in my heart, and I just where any reservation that I had before about the Coptic Orthodox and these theological differences, they kind of melted, and instead I just became so open. And one of the last things that he said to me was just, may God grant that one day we may be able to celebrate the liturgy together, and that really is my hope and prayer. Moving on, because we have so much more still to see. We made our way to Cairo and checked into our hotel. This was Saturday evening, so for Sunday morning, we were able to again join the Patriarch of Alexandria, Theodoros II, the Eastern Orthodox Church there, and at this particular amazing church dedicated to Saint George, we were able to celebrate the liturgy. So we'll start up top right here, I guess. Oh wait, how did I do that? I went back by accident. Here we go. I want to just. This, you can see the scope of the church. We later took a picture with the patriarch on the steps too. But when we came inside of the church, the patriarch wasn't intending on liturgizing. But he said that when he walked into that church that morning, that St. George spoke to him and said, you have to offer these people who are the hope of the church in America your best. And you're not going to serve. So he changed his plans at the last moment and was the chief celebrant. With the abbot of the monastery there, who oversees the churches that are in Cairo. He gave us that the abbot gave us a wonderful tour of the grounds, including this ancient church here, which they call the Church of New Martyrs. For these new martyrs were 500 years old, not in the past generation, but still they showed us many of the holy sites while we were there. Here's the picture of us with the patriarch there, and it was just a joyous liturgy. His way of serving was truly so embracing. This was also, I think, believed the site of another visitation of the Holy Family and the Virgin Mary. And I know some of us, and most of us, passed through and got to go down below into this place, which was a well. And I believe it's water that is attributed to a visit of the Holy Family. Does anybody remember anything different than that?
From what I remember, it was like a well that the Theotokos used to feed, give water to Christ. And it was like salt water, but when she fed it to him, it turned pure. And so we were all able to take a sip of the water.
Yeah. Thank you, Kelsey, for adding that. Does anybody remember our monk father? I'm sorry, I'm just not remembering his name, but
was it Father Damaskinos?
Damaskinos, yeah. Very happy to have us there. He said there's 10 brothers that are connected to the monastery, but on Sundays they all are going out and serving in other parishes in Cairo. So they weren't able to be with us this particular day. Here's that icon of St. George that the patriarch said, we've heard St. George speaking to him that morning and telling him to vest and to serve along with us, and we're so grateful for that. So after that visit at St. George, we then went to the Coptic quarter, and I don't think we were prepared for all that we experienced here in the Coptic quarter. I think this is where we really began to encounter much more fully a sense of what Alexandra was saying before, that there are saints that have given their lives for Christ in our times, in our lifetimes of these places. So Ferris, do you want to? You're here in this picture here by this column in the church. Do you want to tell a little bit of that story? And what
I can do that. So I don't remember the specific time. I think it was something around 1967, maybe, or
no. It was wasn't it 2019?
You're thinking of when we went to the
the Butrousia Church.
You're right. I'm sorry. Thank you. But go ahead first. Maybe you're right. In 1960.
Oh yeah, it does say on the picture 1967. But basically, it was during the time when it was there was a warfare going on between Israel and Egypt and other countries, and there was suddenly blood coming out of this column, out of this pillar, and then the Pope at the time put his finger inside, and the blood miraculously stopped. So they kind of made this entire section there just to highlight the fact that, okay, this was the place where that happened. And it was just beautiful to hear the story there. And the tour guide, the way she worded it was also very fascinating.
Yeah. And when you say Pope, we want to make that clear for people who may be not familiar that the head of the Coptic Orthodox Church has always been called the Pope. Pope just being a word meaning Papa or father, and I think they even said that it was the head of the Church of Rome took the name Pope, after the head of the Church of the in Alexandria. So I think because of that misunderstanding, I think I have a couple of slides that are out of place, but is there anything else on this particular picture that anyone remembers? I think there was another bookstore, wasn't there, up in here that we got to see?
Was that the church that was called the Hanging Church, where it was built on a foundation of like ancient Roman fortresses?
Exactly. Thank you. And that Hanging Church was also another believed site of the Holy Family stopping. And something else miraculous, I think, a blessing of water that happened there. Also, it was while we were waiting inside here that something else that just seemed very biblical to us happened, and that was I think the day before we had talked about the plagues, the various plagues, and one of the plagues being the hailstone, and then here we were waiting for some of the group to finish purchasing things, and kind of out of nowhere, a hailstorm came up. Wasn't it here, President, or was that somewhere else?
No, that was at St. Damianus.
Oh, St. Damianus, that's right. But we had things like that happen to us, which were just remarkable. Somebody else was going to share something?
Oh, I was going to share that middle picture right where next to where it says Coptic Quarter. Was that
right.
the cave that we went down into? That was where it had like the original ground where the Holy Family stayed, and it was like that little window. That was really like a special moment too. We like waited forever to get into this little like cave area, and it was packed with all kinds of like tourists, which was really different from anywhere else we had gone, because at the monasteries they were really quiet, and usually the people that were there were like locals, like people that are just there on like regularly. But these areas, it felt like very different. There were a lot of tourists around just like going to see the churches. But when we got down, so we like had to descend steps into this little cave area that had little places where the Holy Family had walked, like the original ground. It was like almost like this like silence fell upon us, and it was like you could just like feel the presence and peace in that cave. And that was, at least for me, like a really
Kelsey,
and be there.
Kelsey, thank you so much for sharing that. Yeah. I think we're going to continue to move on. On our way then, after seeing the Coptic part of Cairo and having lunch on the bus, we went to a place called Saint Simeon's, or Saint Simon the Tanner. This is a fascinating location, and a miraculous story that of how it came about. This particular church, which housed, or can't really say housed because it's outdoor. You can see it. You can see from this picture, this auditorium. It fit up to 50,000 people, right? Or was it 20,000 or 50,000? Oh no! What did I just do? How did I do that?
I think you might have like clicked the back arrow. So if you go forward.
All right. And I'll get us back to where we were.
Is anybody getting a lot of feedback sound?
I am, yeah.
I'm hearing a
I
buzz.
am too, yeah.
Yes.
Mine comes and goes.
Yours comes and goes, yeah.
I don't know if that's if it's coming from my laptop or maybe somebody else who's not muted, but if it's happening again, please let us know. So here we are in the Coptic quarter, and then Saint Simon the Tanner. Anybody from the group who wants to share a little bit more about this story and their experience there?
I can tell you what I wrote in my journal, and it was that this was such an amazing and complex story and beautiful, and that I cannot reiterate it, but it would be easily looked up. So anybody can could probably truly, look it up online and read that most amazing story. Yeah. So, but these are photos of this place now, Simon the Tanner, the right. Cut mountain.
What I remember is that about 1,000 years ago, there was a period of time where both the Jews who had grown and were a strong presence in Cairo and the Muslims colluded and wanted to see if there was a way that they could rid themselves of the Christians. And so they approached the Christian rulers, and they basically wanted to debate, and they said a particular passage from scripture where Jesus said, if you have faith as the grain of a mustard seed, you'll say to this mountain, move from here to there, and it will do it, and nothing will be impossible for you. And they said, so this is just proof that your scriptures cannot be true, because how could this possibly happen? And so basically they gave the Christians 3 days in which to determine or figure out how they were going to do this. And I guess it was the Pope who was praying, or one of the leaders of the church who was praying. This is what I remember. And it was revealed that there was a tanner named Simon who he fixed sandals and shoes, and he was a very humble person. And no one would have thought that he had this holiness, but he had the grace to pray and for this to happen. So they approached him, they found him, approached him. He said he would do it, but he didn't want anybody to know that he was doing it. So when it happened, he was not the one in front praying, but he was behind praying. And lo and behold, this huge mountain lifted up and moved, I think it was several miles to another location. There was more having to do with why they asked for that mountain to be moved from one place to another, but in any event, it happened, and then those who were seeking to get rid of the Christians were ashamed. And more recently, there's a very large population of Christians that Peter was telling us about, who do 90% of all the recycling in Egypt. They're basically the ones who kind of do all of the recycling, and they all live in one particular area, and they do it in such an amazing way that they recycle an amazing percentage of. They're able to reuse an amazing percentage of what they collect, but they do all the collection of everything recycling, and they live off of this. And they're the ones that built this amphitheater. It's under the Coptic Orthodox Church, and unfortunately we don't see it from the other angle to see kind of the front of the church, but you get a sense from this picture right here of the kind of the scope of the mountain behind, and then the church is down underneath on this kind of cliff. And recently when there was the uprising in Egypt, what wasn't it about 11-12 years ago, that Christians fled here as a place for protection. And there's so many other stories. Here you see basically the staff, myself, Christina Andreessen, who is the director of ministries for OCF, Peter Mansour, one of our Coptic Orthodox who works for OCF. This is his sister, who is a nurse, Ida, President, of course. And this is Alexis Friesen. Alexis is the volunteer student coordinator of all the Rio Break trips. So she's the one who really had a huge amount to do with putting this particular trip of us together. And then here's a group picture of all of us there. quite an extraordinary location and place.
Yeah. Father, go back to the icon there. It's not really clear to see unless it's pointed out, but that's an icon of the mountain.
I did it again.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, everybody. Okay, we'll get to it.
Yeah, keep going. Yeah, right, 26, yeah. Of the mountain being lifted up so you can see the sun between the earth and
Oh, right.
under
right.
the mountain. Yeah.
Thank you, President, for pointing that out. So this is not a reflection. This is showing what happened, that it was raised so high, the sun which was setting actually shone underneath the mountain as it moved.
Yeah. And then the Christians glorifying and the others falling away. Yeah, on the other side.
And one of these persons is actually the person, Simon the Tanner, who was praying, but he wanted to be hidden, right?
Well, there he is with the halo. Yeah, in the front, I think.
Yeah, I think at the time they couldn't see him, but in the icon, he's the one with the halo. The
Yeah.
sun in the front.
Oh, right here. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Such a wonderful story.
But again, look it up and read it. I don't think you did it justice.
No, I don't think I did either. So we then arrived at the hotel, or did we go back to the hotel? We were already there. Yeah, that's what we did for the day. We had dinner and went back to the hotel, and then we were treated to a liturgy the next morning, which I don't think was. Oh no. Then I have things a little bit out of place in here.
Doesn't really matter.
Father, I think the next day is when we did the pyramids. I know
We
you're
saw
asking
the
about
pyramids,
that.
right?
Yeah.
We're going to flip the 2 days. So after the day of seeing the pyramids, then we checked out of a hotel, and we had the opportunity to go to a Coptic Orthodox parish, which happened to be the place where Peter's parents were married. Peter, or Coptic Orthodox or something.
I think that was in Alexandria.
Oh, okay. All right. You're right.
I think his wife's family, something with his wife's family. Yeah.
Right.
But there was a connection with him and his family here.
And this was just an amazing experience of being in this liturgy as well. There's so many things that we could say, but the iconography in this church was just absolutely so moving, and in its simplicity. The iconographer who, here's the burning bush, for example, the iconographer who wrote these icons in the church is kind of world renowned, and has led to a kind of a renaissance of this unique style of iconography in the church. The liturgy itself was very moving, and the one of the things that the chief celebrant does is, after they inspect the bread and the wine before the liturgy and after the liturgy itself, then they actually wash everything down on the altar table, and then they take the remaining of that water that they've used to now wash all of the vessels, and they walk through the church and they sprinkle everybody with it. So it's like you get a kanayismo, a water blessing service at the end of every liturgy. It's just refreshing, and just a nice aspect of their worship. Anybody else want to say anything about our liturgy that morning?
One of the interesting things I noticed is like traditional Eastern Orthodox parishes, particularly in like the Ephraimite monasteries in the United States, men and women were separated, but men were on the left and women were on the right. But in the Eastern Orthodox monasteries were
it's reversed. Yeah,
it's reversed. The men are on the right and the women are on the left.
Thank you, Braden. So now we move on to, we went from there to the Cathedral of St. Mark. So this is the center of the Coptic Orthodox Church. This is where on that very day that we were there, Pope Theodoros the second was in gathering with bishops, some type of a particular special gathering. We hope that we might possibly be with him or have a short audience with him, but that wasn't to happen. And what we knew was on our schedule was we were going to go see the relics of the Holy Apostle and Evangelist Mark, which we did. Let me move this down here so I can see a little bit better. So here we are. This is his reliquary was in this beautiful circular church, and the relics are inside of this table, this square, very ornately adorned table, because they celebrate the liturgy on top of the relics of the holy martyrs. So here's our whole group in front of the relics, and these icons surrounded the entire area. So it started right around here, and it went all the way around and came back around to the other way, kind of telling the history of the martyrdom of the Holy Apostle and Evangelist all the way until, I think it was the return of his relics. Is that what this was?
Yeah.
And here's kind of the martyrdom as he was being dragged in stones, and then this is the end of the story. On all of these people were actually right here were all people that were present at that service when his remains were returned to Cairo. When they ended up in the Vatican, right? I think we also got to venerate the relics of Saint Athanasius the Great of Alexandria. And I think that's what we see here. Some of our people kneeling at his grave. Also, they celebrate the liturgy there. This is the main church from the outside. You can see how huge a church it was. It was quite amazing to visit in that church. But we also went into another church, which was right next to it. And you see this column here. This column gives evidence of, I think that this was that church that we entered into. And this was the terrorist attack that happened in 2019, where a terrorist trying to get into where the Pope was in order to detonate the bomb that he was rigged with was detected, because in all the churches in Egypt, all the Coptic churches, you have to go through a metal detector to enter into the church. And it was found out that he was carrying something, so he ran away. And a particular security guard chased him, and he entered into this church and detonated the bomb that was there. And you can see the shrapnel of the explosion. You can see what it did to this stone, and just to have a sense of what must have happened. That blast must have been like. It killed 21 people, and amongst those 21 people, there were 20 women. And then the one man, I think this is where I confused the pictures. That was from the previous one, but one of the women, or the person who opened up the door for us. So this picture didn't copy well, but that's me and her together. Peter told us was the wife of the security guard who died in 2019. And at first we were kind of shocked when we heard that. And then we thought to ourselves, what do you say to a person whose husband has died from a terrorist attack? But instead, we were thanking her for what her husband did. And she was conveying to us, that he's praying for us. You see her joy. She serves at the church every day. Just imagine to be in a place where your husband was martyred. We then went on. We weren't expecting this, but we went and and found what looked to be like a museum. It was a museum that showed that was dedicated to the previous Pope, but it also had these pictures. This is horrible. All these pictures are cut off. I'm sorry.
Father, are you still zoomed in on the slide? Is it still zoomed?
How else can I unzoom? I'm trying to do it the way I normally was, and it's.
Oh, then it might be, that might just be how it copied. I wasn't sure if it was still zoomed.
So this picture right here is the picture of her husband, and they had these kind of cubicles, and then these other cubicles with the clothes were actually pictures of the martyrs that were in Libya. We talked about them some last time, but these 21 men, 20 were Coptic Orthodox, and we heard this amazing story shared with us. I actually have saved a video of the person who story who met us that day. So what I want to try to do is see if I can open that up quickly and share this with all of us. And I'll optimize this for videotape. Oh no, this isn't the one. I'm sorry. Let me go back. Let's see. And I guess it was. If I go back to here, but I exit out, I'm not able to. I guess I'm not going to be able to show it to you, but it was the person telling us the story, and that was just a miraculous thing that happened to us. That this person who was involved with the telling the story of the return of the remains of these martyrs that died in 2011 in a terrorist. They were imprisoned by ISIS. They were tortured. They were told that they could deny Christ and they would be set free, but none of them did. So it was something that they chose. And then ISIS put together a video production that this person said must have taken 2 weeks for them, practicing it over and over again. These martyrs didn't just go through a martyrdom once, but they went through it many times, as they didn't know if this was the time that they were going to say that the video was good enough for them to continue and finish the martyrdom. But they were ultimately beheaded. Their bodies were determined to be long to these men. The bodies were disposed of, discarded in a secret place, but somehow a friend of that was a wife of somebody else told of the driver who drove their bodies or something along those lines, let their location of the remains be known. Other governments got involved, and eventually Libya allowed for it. First, it was determined that their DNA belonged to these men from this one particular region and a few villages in Egypt, and then they were allowed to be returned. So this person was the television reporter who was live broadcasting the return of their relics. He said the relics, which when they were returned, they were found to be at least partially incorrupt, and their bodies after 3 years, which shows their sanctity as well. But the miracle that happened to him was that as they brought these remains back, they had to pass through areas that there was no wireless. And he kept telling, as he was broadcasting live, the people listening that at some point the broadcast would have to stop and following. And everyone in the crew, any device that they had lost reception. There was no more wireless for any of their devices to work. but the transmission of this miraculously never stopped, even though it required great bandwidth to transmit until they came all the way back to the village. So just a remarkable experience. And when we sang in this location, thy martyrs, O Lord, in their courageous contest for thee, received as the prize the crowns of incorruption and life. I don't think I've ever felt that hymn. I don't know if I've ever will feel that hymn as much as I did that day when we sang it with these martyrs. So we had left Cairo, and we were now on our way to Galala. What I put out of order was that I put our visit to the pyramids in this location when we actually did it the day before. We did it on the same day that we had the liturgy. But here's Presbyterian and I on top of the camels. Just about everybody in the group got a camel ride with the pyramids in the background. And we also got to go into the pyramids. And when we went into the largest of the pyramids, some of us, most of us, also we went in underneath and into the very center of the pyramid, and that was where we were able to go into the place where the pharaoh whose the pyramid was his tomb, the place where he was buried. We got to to go into that very same room, and this is what we were able to do.
Let's sing, glorify the Lord. Christos anesti
So I don't know about everybody else. Sophia, you haven't said anything yet. Do you remember singing Christos Anesti, what that felt like?
It was really cool. But also it was really hot in there.
Yeah.
It was really like, never thought I would be inside a Great Pyramid of Giza singing Christos Anesti. Unique.
It just seemed like the perfect thing to do, though, didn't it?
Yes.
So we arrived in our resort on the Red Sea, by the Red Sea, and it was El Galala Aqua Park, and it was a wonderful place to spend our last few days, to have a little bit more recreation. But the next morning, we got up very early and traveled about 45 minutes away. We got up at 6 in the morning for the 45-minute ride in order to, the first thing that we did when we arrived at the monastery of St. Anthony's was to ascend the mountain and go to the cave of St. Anthony. And as I said, each day just got better. I think when we came to this particular day and this site, we were all at times just speechless. What could you say? We also had a lot of fun doing a little calisthenics and stretching before we went up. But something really remarkable happened on our way up. We spent over an hour climbing up the 2,500 steps. Does anybody in the group want to talk about that experience? I don't want to be the only one talking.
Well, it was an extraordinary experience because, like you said, we started out so early in the morning, and we knew it was a 1.3 mile walk up these stairs, up to the cave where St. Anthony lived. I cannot for the life of me imagine how you would get up to that cave without those stairs. So, yeah.
But we met people who grew up in that vicinity who came and visited while we were there. And they said they used to come up all the time, even without these stairs. People just
amazing.
yeah.
But we started out very enthusiastically at the beginning, you know, not realizing how far up it was. By the time we got halfway, where there was a little chapel and a nice landing, we all stopped, waited for everyone to get to that point, and we kind of regrouped and recalibrated. And we asked those that had brought up the rear to then lead us the rest of the way. And we all just sort of fell in and moved as one the rest of the way up the mountain. Feedback is so bad. I don't know if I should keep talking.
You're hearing a lot of feedback. We're not hearing any feedback, President, but we're hearing you loud and clear.
Okay, well then I'll keep going. Anyway, then we made our way up to the top, and there was a group there of young adults similar to ours, but about half the size, with their priest, and they were from New Jersey. So that was nice to slowly get to know them a little bit. They had arrived before us, so they were taking their time going into the cave. You see the entrance here. Father, you want to point that out? It's just a little entrance, zoom out. And you really had to kind of go in sideways to get in. You know, I mean, everyone fit just fine, but it was, it was a little leap of faith walking in there, because it was just very dark. And, you know, you kind of felt your way for, I don't know, maybe 20 yards, maybe not quite that far. And then there was a little stairway down, and then a landing where Saint Anthony had his home. And there's an altar in there now, and there are rugs all over the floor, so people can sit or kneel and pray and be in there for a while, which we all did. And then I had some beautiful pictures that I sent Father to add to this, but they didn't go through. But it was really beautiful that going in, it felt very dark. It was very dark, but on the way out, you could see the light outside. It was just such an extraordinary experience to come walk toward that light and come out again. So
I'd like to hear from some of the group about your experiences of being in the cave of St. Anthony. I'm going to stop to share for a moment so we can see your faces. Who'd like to share first? First, you want to tell us your experience in the cave?
Oh yeah, I can start, Father. Basically, like, this place was one of my highlights. Like, the only place I had heard before we made the journey, before we made the pilgrimage from Egypt, that was the place. Like, I knew about St. Anthony's monastery, St. Anthony's cave. And even though the journey going up to the cave was, let's say, not the easiest, not the smoothest, it did take quite some time to get there. However, when we went inside, I had a lot of thoughts in my mind, like, what was I going to expect to see? Like, that was the cave in which St. Anthony, the father of all monks, stayed there for around 20 years or so. And when we were hearing the story and everything related to it, I was like, wow, how can one person stay in that place? And when we went there, it was a lot smaller than what I initially thought. And we barely fit there. Like, we were 10 people or so at one time, or one go, something like that. But then again, when we sat there, and I was like, had no thoughts whatsoever in my mind. I was like, completely flushed everything from my head, and I was just sitting there thinking about myself, thinking about, like, God, thinking about Jesus, like, at the time, like, how St. Anthony was able to stay there and live there for a big chunk of his life. So, and I was sitting there just praying all the time, and it was very, very rejuvenating faith-wise for me to be able to sit there. I sat there for around like 15 minutes or so, but if I had the opportunity, I would have sat there for probably twice the amount, maybe 40 minutes. I would do that. But then again, it was the time for the second group to go in. But I also, at the time, if you remember, I was really, really happy to chant the Der Vohormia chant in Armenian. And that place really inspired me to do so. And I was really happy I was able to do that.
Yeah, and it was very moving for everybody. to hear you chant in Armenian. I didn't mention, but we had a couple of Coptic Orthodox, and Ferris was our Armenian Orthodox on the trip. It was wonderful to have him. He also speaks Arabic, so that was a big help as well. Jordan, thank you for joining us. We know you had work tonight as well, but you want to share your experience of being in the cave?
Yeah, sure. So I went in with the second group in the cave, and there was a few things that really stuck out to me in the cave. One was that since it was not big enough for us all to go in at once, we went in these two groups. It allowed a very interesting experience because the group that was outside the cave was singing hymns and chanting the entire time the other group was in the cave. And because the cave was like close to the entrance, but not too close to the entrance, we could hear them, but it was like not like, but it kind of like echoed a little bit just because it was a little bit of a distance. And that was a really nice experience to, while we were in prayer in the cave, to also hear the chanting and the prayer from outside the cave as well. Additionally, just from where I was sitting in the cave, I was kind of like looking right at the icon of Christ the Judge, and kind of looking at that icon while I was in prayer was a very interesting experience, because like obviously I've seen that icon many times, but in that kind of environment you can really see and feel the kind of the two natures of that icon, the kind of like more angry face as well as the more like happy face, kind of swapping back and forth as I was praying. So that was also pretty special. And
yeah, we tried to spend a little time saying the Jesus prayer while we were in there, but for those from our own community, that was the time that I got out all the list of all of my names of all of you, and in front of that small altar and in the cave of St. Anthony is where I was able to fulfill my pastoral duty to all of you and pray for you to St. Anthony there. We'll take one more person to share their experience in the cave. Kelsey and Sophia, you're being kind of quiet.
I can share. I wanted to give other people a chance to talk. I feel like I'm talking a lot, but
No, it's great.
Jordan kind of nailed what I was gonna say. Is I was in the first group, and I remember like we got in the cave. Presbyterian was talking about how it was really small and dark. I was definitely like kind of scared going in because I couldn't see where I was going. I was like, wasn't sure if I was gonna like fit through because it's like walls like closing in. But once you made it inside, it was like so, like you could just like feel St. Anthony's presence, feel like the holiness of the place we were in. And we all like got on our hands and knees and like crawled to like get in a space where everyone could fit. And I think I was in like the very back, so I like could see the people sitting next to me, but I couldn't see anything else. And that was like, it was such a surreal experience because it was like kind of like Ferris and Jordan explained, like I just like felt like totally like dialed into like where I was like feeling fully present in the moment, and like all thoughts were kind of like gone. And then when Jordan mentioned like you could hear the other half of our group outside chanting, and once they started, I think they were chanting a new commandment, I like got emotional because like it was just like I was there and like I could hear my like peers chanting, but I was also sitting with them inside this cave, and I don't even think I could explain it like with words, but it was just like I felt so connected to like Christ in that moment, and like I really felt the magnitude of like where we were and what we were doing, and that was just really special.
Thank you, Kelsey. That was beautiful. Braden, you stayed, I think, the longest of anybody in the cave. We had to almost drag you out.
Yes, I actually went in 2 times. I went in very briefly at the last time because I felt I had to really savor the moment of being in St. Anthony's cave, and I felt like I could just just be there for hours and hours on end praying there, because it's something with such a great holy presence there. And like as the abbot of St. Anthony's spoke with us, I guess we can jump up a little ahead, but like he said that there's still miracles to this day associated with St. Anthony Monastery, and that was actually one of the questions I asked him are there any miracles associated with the monastery to this day? And he said that there are many, and he shared with us two of them.
Do you want to tell those stories, Braden?
Sure, I'll tell those stories from what I
So-
can remember.
I'm going to zoom in on the abbot of, or one of the elders of St. Anthony's Monastery, which had over 200 monks, I think, there in it. But this is Father Bishoy right here. Go ahead.
Yeah, so Father Bishoy shared with us that what happened is a 6-year-old boy was with his family on the monastery grounds, or around the area of the monastery, and he got separated from his family, and they were looking for the boy all night long.
They had gone up to the cave, and there was a large group of them, and the family had thought that he was with some others, similar like Christ up at the temple with the Virgin Mary and Joseph, and they came back down and the boy wasn't there. So they sent out search parties, right? And it was evening, and they kept searching and searching, but it kept getting, darker and darker. And so finally they had to call the search off because they were fearful that, somebody would fall off of a precipice off of the mountain. Go ahead, Braden.
Yeah, and what happened is the little boy came across an old abuna, and he allowed him to sleep on his lap throughout the night.
In the cave.
In the cave.
The boy said, I was in the cave and the old abuna came to me. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And eventually the abuna led the boy back to the monastery, and they came to unlock the church at 3 a.m. and they saw the boy there, and they asked, how did you come back here? And then the boy pointed to an icon of Saint Anthony the Great and said it was
right. He said old abuna brought me here because the gates of the monastery were locked, and there's no way that he could have come in from outside of the monastery. And who was this old abuna that somehow could let him into the monastery? But he said he left me here, and he told me to wait for you to come, the person to open up the church, and you would take care of me. And so then they brought him inside of the church when news got around that the boy was found, and he saw the icon of St. Anthony's, and he said, oh, old abuna, right there. And that was, he said, only a few years ago, right? That happened.
Yeah, he shared with us two recent ones. The other one was about a young man who was with the group who went to St. Anthony's cave, I believe it was, and he had ulterior motives for being with the group. He was just with the group because he wanted to be around with the girls. He didn't want any spiritual experience or to have a deeper connection with God or any of the saints. And what happened is that he eventually saw that caused him to have a deep repentance and for him to admit that he was just there for the girls, but then he
Braden, we lost you a little bit, or at least I lost you right at the end there. Could you just repeat the last part?
Yeah. So he saw Saint Anthony the Great in the cave there, I believe, and it caused him to have a great repentance, and he admitted that he had ulterior motives.
Yeah. This was our last, full day on pilgrimage. We did get back late that afternoon and have some time in the water park, and the next day we had breakfast at the hotel and had time on the Red Sea, which is our last slide. But this was like the final highlight of all the highlights. Not only the cave of St. Anthony, but then to be in this monastery and to have Abuna Bashoy walk around with us and tell us the story of how he came there. I told this story a couple of weeks ago in the sermon that I gave at the church, so I'm not going to repeat it now. But just so, well, maybe I didn't. Anyways, the story was that he had wanted to be a monk from the time that he was young, but then when he was a teenager, his father was kind of insisting on his being married, and so he said to his dad, "Well, let me just go and pray about it." And he went to St. Anthony's monastery to pray, and he said, "And I've never left. You know, I'm still praying about it." And then he had such a zeal to want to live the monastic life in the most ascetic aspect of the monastic life. He wanted to live as a hermit. And while he was still living in the monastery, he stopped coming out of his cell. And the monks would come to him and he would say, "I'm not leaving. I'm just going to be a hermit here." And finally, one of the older monks came to him and he said, "You know, my brother, that St. Anthony has appeared to me 3 nights in a row. And he's told me that you need to come out of your cell. It's not time for you to do this." And his response as this young upstart monk was, "He appeared to you and he didn't appear to me." He said, "You know, I'm not gonna, that's not enough for me. You know, if I'm the one that's in the cell, if he didn't want me to stay, why didn't he come to me? I need a clearer sign than that." And the older monk said to him, "It's a St. Anthony. He told me 3 nights in a row. You want a clearer sign than this?" He said, "Why don't we both pray for 3 days and fast for 3 days? And then I'm certain I'll have my clearer sign." So that's what they did. They fasted and prayed for 3 days. And he said after 3 days of fasting and praying, the walls of his cell fell in. All the walls, the entire cell collapsed in on him so badly that they feared that he had died. And they had to have an ambulance come. So he said, "I not only came out of the cell, I came out of the monastery." But the best part was that when they were wheeling him, you know, to the ambulance on the stretcher, the monk came up to him and asked him, "Was that a clear enough sign for you?" He was just such a joy to be with. And the next morning, they actually, so this is our final morning in Egypt. The monks did a special liturgy for us in English. And you can see in this
We
picture.
drove all the way back to the monastery.
Yeah, most of us went back really early in the morning for this final liturgy. They let some of our group participate. And it was the first time that Abuna Bashoy had actually ever liturgized in English. But we appreciated him and Abuna Marcos so much when they gave us the story. These are other priests that were just visiting the same time that we were there. This is the priest from New Jersey that goes every year with his faithful parishioners from New Jersey. Here's us on the walls, up on the walls of the monastery there. But this picture here is the picture that they showed us that had been taken of the incorrupt relics of a contemporary saint. It was Iosis was his name, I believe. And
I think, Father, it was Eustace.
Eustace. He was. Here we are in the refectory. You know, I want to tell the story about what happened in the refectory too, but let me tell this story first.
Father, it's already 8:40, just so you know.
If anybody needs to leave, you're more than welcome. I won't. I just. I know we could go all night, but I want to just finish up with a few more of these stories. So this very, very simple monk that lived there only had one garment, and he more often than not he was barefoot, and he fasted very, very strictly and just remained in constant communion with God. And they said he rarely said anything, but there were 2 expressions that he had. And one of those two expressions, he would just simply ask people, do you know what time it is? Or he'd ask them for the time. What time is it? And he didn't mean like what time on your watch, just for us to think about. What are we doing? The time that we have here in this lifetime. And one of the stories that Abuna Mark told us Marcos told us about him was that a woman had come to see him, hearing of his great miracles that he would do through his prayer and other things, and she saw him, in his clothes that were all worn, and she just was scandalized by his appearance, and didn't think he could have been the person that she was thinking about. But later on in the worship service, she saw him bathed in light, and she realized that he was truly a holy monk. So when this picture was taken by somebody, there was no reflection, no light the way it is in the picture, but only when after the picture was taken did this light in the picture show up, and it just was this reminder of the holiness of this monk who died, I believe, in 1970s, 1975 in the monastery. Here's the refectory, and Abuna Mark got one of our group up and had them do a little Harry Potter trick, and he said, the lights in this refectory are going to come on through this saying of this, and he convinced this person to do it. But while she was saying what he had told her to say, Christina told her to say, he turns around and he goes to the light switch on the wall and he turns the lights on. She didn't see, but everybody else kind of saw, and that was the big joke that he did with us then. Such a great sense of humor the monks had there. So this is our next to last slide, and our last day in the morning, we got to get up, or after the liturgy when we came back, we got to go to the Red Sea, had a little Bible study, as you can see, thinking about the parting of the Red Sea, talking about the significance for our own spiritual life. And then while that was going on, kind of in the background here, which I didn't really notice, but you could even see the storm that was brewing, and it was a windstorm that made international news that day. But all of a sudden, the wind came in all at once, and we were just making our way back to our hotel but some of us were caught in that windstorm, and it was quite a harrowing experience. But just another thing that reminded us of the holiness of this place, and what happened there, that God did these miracles recorded in Holy Scripture. So I'm going to leave the share, leave the study, and just ask if anybody has final words, either from our group or anybody has any questions or you want to share from what you heard tonight on our study. And Presidenta, when you as well, if you want to say any last thoughts.
Father, it's just a very fascinating pilgrimage you had. I really, really, excuse me to interrupt you, Presbytera Kristen. I just really want to go there. Wow.
Yes.
But I have one question. When you were saying, when one goes to Italy and St. Mark's Cathedral in Venice or something, I thought some of the relics were there. Is that true? Or I didn't understand what we venerate when we go into the Catholic Church in Italy.
I don't remember in detail what had happened. I think that they probably some of the remains are left at St. Mark's, but that the majority of the remains, the holy relics of the apostle and evangelist, were returned more recently.
So they were there in Italy because the Crusaders stole them, and then do they still have them there?
Something along those lines, but no, the recently, and that's the chapel was built with all that iconography that was done in commemoration of the return of these relics by the Roman Catholic Church, a gesture of reconciliation with the Coptic Church. So,
Father Theodore, this was done in which year?
Does anybody remember? Braden, you're pretty good with these type of things.
I mean, was it in the last 20 years, you mean?
It was more than 20 years. The
Yeah.
relics of St. Mark's were returned to Egypt in the 1960s following the Vatican II Council.
Okay, so like in Italy, in that St. Mark's Church, there's some relics too, you would imagine?
I think
Yes.
there's a small amount of relics still there, but they returned a large portion of it back to Egypt starting in the 1960s.
Yeah, just like I was fascinated with in Nablus at Jacob's Well, I do not know how Geronda Eustinios got back the vase that the Crusaders stole, had in the Vatican Museum. How this got back in
Yeah.
Nablus at Jacob's Well is like, wow, mind-blowing to me.
Well, it's clearly that God also willed it. And, you know, I remember with the return of the relics more recently of St. Sava, the incorrupt relics that also were at the Vatican and that went back to St. Sava's monastery in the Holy Land, right? The saint was appearing to a pope and telling him that his remains needed to go home, and the pope didn't listen. And so after that pope died, he started appearing to the next pope and saying, "You have to do this for me. You have to return these relics." So, you know, clearly it was some divine assistance, I think. Margaret, I see you have your hand up.
My last question, Father Theodore, before you go to the next person, please, I apologize. Because I love iconography, you said that the icons were a well-renowned iconographer. Do you know the name of who you were saying? I was just curious, out of curiosity, and excuse me, that's my last question.
Braden, do you remember?
Yes, there is, in the 20th century, there was a resurgence in what's called Neo-Coptic iconography. The iconographer who studied to revive Coptic iconography actually went to France in the 1960s and studied under the Eastern Orthodox theologian Uspensky, who is very famous. And his name is Isaac Fanus.
Isaac Fanus?
Yeah, I'm going to, this is how you spell it.
Isaac Fanus. Yeah, it's very Arabic, the Fanus part. It means, well, thank you. Sorry. Thank you very much. You are also blessed to have gone to such an amazing place. And I pray one day the Lord will help me to go there. Thank you, Father Theodore. Thank you, Presbytera Christi.
Thank you, Maria. Jordan, I want to thank you for putting that picture of looking from inside of St. Anthony's Cave out in the chat as well. I want to call that to everyone's attention. It's such a beautiful picture. Margaret, you had a question you've been waiting patiently to ask.
I was just wondering, could all the Orthodox partake of communion when you were in the liturgies of the Coptic Church?
So we did not. It was a big question. We'd experienced so much, and they were showing such hospitality that I actually went up to Abuna Bishoy, and I said, Abuna, I don't feel like I can tell our people if they really want to approach. You know, I don't want to tell them you're unable to do it. But at the same time, you know, we noticed that there's in more of this type of thing happening in Egypt. While we were on our trip, we saw some Coptic Orthodox who did receive in the patriarchal churches over there. But I think what Abuna said was really helpful. He said, Father, and I want this very much as well, and I would commune your people. However, we don't want to have any problems for the monastery. And you know, that would have been something that could easily have affected them as well. So it reminded me of something that I read in I think it was in a book on St. Paisios, but this expression that not everyone can get to the liturgy and yet St. Paisius had once taught that if one person from a family goes and receives communion, the whole family through that person it receives, and the whole family is blessed. And so we had our Coptic Orthodox, we had our Armenian Orthodox that we're able to approach, and so we said they're receiving on behalf of all of us.
Yeah, and we were grateful, but we all felt that it was very poignant to not be able to receive in what was holy and Orthodox liturgy, to be at St. Anthony's Monastery in the Egyptian desert and not receive communion. So we all left there really hoping and praying we will see the day when there is that reconciliation.
Yeah. Thank you for your question, Margaret. So we've gone way over. It is 8:52. I apologize to anyone that we've inconvenienced you, but I'm just so grateful for all of our group that came on, and grateful for this chance. That there's so much more that we're just scratching the surface of our experience. Hi, Lex. Thanks for joining us. That's my sister. Thank you for listening in. Presitera, I think what I'd like to do is I'm going to sing the hymn for martyrs, because that was such a big takeaway. Is so many contemporary martyrs in our own lifetimes in the last 10, 15 years, gave their lives for Christ there and gave that witness, and it's had such a profound effect upon the Coptic Orthodox Church. I'm going to just sing the hymn for the martyrs, but then I'm going to ask you to say a kind of a closing prayer for us, if you don't mind. Thank you. Thy martyrs, O Lord, in their courageous contest for thee, received as their prize the crowns of incorruption and life from thee, our immortal God. For since they possess thy strength, they cast down the tyrants and wholly destroyed the demon, strengthless presumption. O Christ God, by their prayer save our souls, since thou art merciful.
Amen. Lord Jesus Christ, our God, please accept our gratitude for all of the opportunities that you give to us, those of us who have the opportunity to go on pilgrimage to see and experience these places on earth that you have touched and sanctified in so very many ways, and for the opportunity to share these experiences with others through our prayers, through our works, through our expressions. We all know that we are pilgrims on this earth, seeking the citizenship which is in heaven, and you've made it very real to many of us, and for that we thank you. Over guide, guard, protect all of us.
Amen. Thank you, President.
Good night, everybody.
Good night. Before I turn off the recording, I just wanted to also say that, so we haven't determined for certain, but my hope is that we can go to the rest of the Holy Land next week and find someone. Maybe it will be Maria, Corey, maybe it'll be somebody else. It is 2 a.m. over there right now, or 3 a.m. over
now
there.
It's 4, Father. I'm not sure I'll be up next week.
Stevie, did you have your hand up, or say? Did I just see something that you wanted to say?
No, I'm sorry. I just put a happy emoji.
Oh, okay.
Confetti.
Right. So that's where next Wednesday night, if you join us, hopefully we'll be speaking about something. We can't cover everything, certainly, in Palestine and Jerusalem and Israel, but talk about something from there next week if you want to join in again. And with that, I'll turn off the recording and wish everybody a good night.
God be with you, everyone. God bless you.